Hello everyone and welcome to this, another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, yes, we set it up so our character could destroy his enemies. Our character can utterly destroy his enemies and the enemies can't do anything back. And we're going to change that in today's episode. We're going to set it up so your character can die. And that's going to require us to do a number of things. We're going to have to create another particle system, which you guys have already done a bunch of times now. We're going to have to create an enemy damage script, meaning that when the player touches our enemy or the enemy touches the player, whatever, the player takes damage. And lastly, obviously, we're going to have to set up a player health, so the player actually has some kind of hit points. All right, so everyone, let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a player death particle system. You can have a bunch of different ways that your character dies. You could have an animation that occurs when the character falls over or whatever. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, just like I did in the sample, I'm going to set up a really simple particle system that gets instantiated when our character dies. And we're going to use that same particle system for now, for whenever any of our enemies die as well. Okay? So once again, this is our third time we're seeing particles, and I'm hoping this is going to be helping you guys out. I'm hoping you guys are able to get a handle on it once we're done this. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new particle system. All right, and I'm going to call this particle system, I don't know, player death effects. Player death effects. That's good enough. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. All right, that is going to be our particle system. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a new material. And we're going to do the same way as we did the rocket. Now I did something in the notes last time, and this time I'm going to do it for you directly. I'm going to create a new material, bloop, right there, and I'm going to call this one here, I don't know, it doesn't matter, blood drops. All right, blood drops. That's a great material name. Let's call it blood drops material, just so I know exactly what it is. Material. All right, blood drops material. We're not going to use the standard. We are going to use the unlit transparent cutout material. And basically what this is going to allow to happen is, unlike the smoke that I had on here previously, the smoke came out much darker than the actual sprite. All right, the sprite was a very light sprite. Right here, you can see how it's all white, and the smoke itself is black. And I left it like that because, and I used the standard material. That's because the standard material requires lighting. All right, the unlit transparent cutout, or the unlit material, doesn't require lighting in the scene. It kind of lights itself. All right. So we're going to just go in here, we're going to select, and we're going to select our circle, our bloody circle, all right? And that's what we're going to use. If we find that it's too bright, we'll go back here and we'll change it to standard. It doesn't really matter, though, for right now. We're going to use this, and that is good enough. Done, all right? Oops, I didn't mean to hit that again. Done. Now, we're going to go into our player death effects, and just like we did previously, we're going to change our renderer to use our new blood drops. All right, nice and red and bloody. Great. First thing we want to do is we actually want to add in a little bit of gravitation. These things I want to spray out, splatter, and kind of like fall down. All right, so we're going to add a little bit of gravitation here. Not one, because maybe one's fine. Who knows? One. Let's leave it as one for now. And once again, we don't want it to do. We don't want to have it play like this. We want to have the number. Come out of there. We want to have our emission time, instead of this, let's just have 0, and we want to have a burst. Okay, so it's going to be a burst like that. All right, burst like this. Boom. Okay, perfect. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change, and that's way too many particles. Maybe I want like, I don't know, 5. You guys can decide what you think is an awesome bloody burst. All right. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to leave it as looping for now. Ultimately, it's not going to be a loop. We are going to say start lifetime, and the lifetime is going to be between 2, let's make it between 0 and 5. So let's see if that looks good. All right, those are all kind of the same. Let's make it between 2 and 5. All right, and let's change our start speed to be between 2 values, random between, let's say 2 and 5. All right, great. Maybe make it a little higher. 7. Great, that looks awesome. Our start size, let's make it between 0 and 1 is fine. All right. Let me see. That's great. That's my bloody spurt. Let's actually not even make it 1. Let's make it between 0 and 0.75. So it's not quite as bursty bloody. And let's make this not between 0. Let's make this 0.25. So they're a little closer together in size. All right, that's my blood burst. Let's make these 8 particles. There we go. That's my blood burst. I'm not going to change anything else. If I wanted to, I could change the rest of the stuff just like we did before. And you know what? The last thing I am going to change, just because I always like to do it, is color over lifetime. And I'm going to make this alpha 0. All right, so those should fade over time. It's a little bit too long, actually, to start the lifetime. So let's make it between 1 and 3. Maybe that's too long, but you know what? Who cares? I don't care right now. You guys can go through and you guys can play with these values here to see what you like. I'm going to change it because it is bothering me. 0.5. So those should burst and then kind of fade away. Anyway, guys, go through, play with this, see what you like, and then once you got something you like, just leave it. All right, so I'm going to leave it like this for now. I'm going to stop playing with it. Player death effects, great. I'm going to go over to prefab. I'm going to turn off the loop because it's not a loop. I'm going to leave it like that now, and I'm going to add one more thing to this. I'm, of course, going to add my script, my existing script called Destroy Me. And Destroy Me, I want to be destroyed within 1 second, let's say. That's plenty of length of time because it only lives for a total of 1. So 1 second is plenty of time. All right, that's it. Once I've got that the way I like it, and I like it, we're going to take it and we're going to drag it and we're going to drop it right in here. Not in audio, in prefab. All right, prefab. Boom. So now we've got ourselves our existing stuff. Position -10. I don't know if I want it at -10. I don't know why it's at -10. Let's set this up to 0. All right, so it's going to come bursting on the screen. Let's actually make it at decimal 1. So it's kind of in front of minus decimal 1. Oops. Minus decimal 1, so it's going to be in front of everything else. All right, and I'm going to apply this because it's got to go beep into this down here as well. All right, so that's all good. Now I can remove this. Goodbye. We've got ourselves our player death effects right here. Everything is the way we like it. Duration was too long, but whatever. Anyway, guys, that's how we like it. So that is basically what we want to call when our character dies. Okay, that's what we're going to call once our character dies. The next thing we have to do is actually have our character die. That's what we got to do next. So we're going to do that through scripting. And our character can't die without some kind of health. All right, so we're going to go into our character. We're going to go into our character right here. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom. We're going to see add component. So right below our player controller script, and we're going to say add, and we're going to say new script. And we're going to call this one here player health. And it's basically going to have in it the same information that our other one did. All right, let's double click, open it up, and there's our player health. Let's close the rest of these because we don't need them. We don't need rocket hit. We don't need enemy health. I don't know if we need player control. I have to think about it. And we don't need projectile controller. Anyway, so player health. There's a couple of things that we're going to need in here. So the first thing, of course, is our public maximum health. So let's call this. Let's make it into a float. And it's public because we can change it. We can adjust any of these numbers anytime we want directly in the inspector later on. So let's just call this full health. Full health. And that is going to be the maximum amount of health that our player can have. All right, that's our maximum health right there. That's a character at full health. We also have to know, just like we had to know before, and this now can be a private variable, the character's current health. All right, and that allows us to track whether or not our player is alive or dead. All right, we should also have access to our player. Our player controller. We want to make sure that when our character is dead, that we're no longer moving our character around. All right, it's going to be destroyed anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But once it's dead, we want to make sure we don't, we no longer can move that around. So we're going to have access to our player controller script. What did I call it? Just player controller. Great. And we're going to call this thing here control movement. I don't know if I'm going to have to do this or not. I'll have to think about it as I go ahead. Maybe I should have planned these things out a little better. As I go ahead, I'll have to think about whether or not I actually need that, because I'm going to be deleting the character as soon as we kill it anyway. We're gonna actually remove it in our death. So we'll have to consider. Anyway, we'll leave it there for now. I think that's all we need as far as initialization is concerned currently. Sorry, as far as variables are concerned currently, because I'm not going to get into GUI or anything like that right now. We're going to do that in a later episode. So for now, I think that's all we need. We do have to now initialize everything. Our current health, just like previously, our current health is going to be equal to our full health to start off with. That's how our character starts, at full health. You guys can decide if it is otherwise. All right. We might as well do this now. I might as well just do it just in case I need it. Our control movement, we're actually gonna try and we're gonna do right now. We're gonna initialize this, and we know that the player script is on the same location. The player controller script is on the same location as the health, so we can just say get component. You guys have done this a million times now, Get component. We want to get component player health. No, player controller. Bam. And that is going to give us immediate access to the player controller, which we don't really need right now, but we'll leave it there for now. We'll decide a little bit later on. All right, so file, save that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, we're going to have to add a public script just like we did previously. So let's go right below our update. And let's in here add in a public script that's going to be accessed by the enemy. So when the enemy causes us damage or something causes us damage, they're going to have access to this this script. So public, exactly the same as we did before. Void. Take damage. What should I call this? Add. I might as well call it. I called that one add damage. I think. Add damage. All right. And once again, it's going to take a float. And we'll call it damage. Damage. So, and it's going to operate identically to our enemy script. Now, some of you are saying, like, why aren't you using that one then? There are a few things that are going to be different. We'll take a look at it a little later on. Once we start adding GUI and we start adding sound and we start adding all this other stuff, there's going to be some differences in here. And I don't want to override. I'm writing this completely separate functions, separate classes, rather than have overridden classes. So for now, guys, add damage. First thing we have to do is we have to see if we're alive. So if the damage we're taking, let's say something doesn't cause us damage. If something causes 0 damage, if our damage is less than or equal to 0, then we can get out of this. All right. We can get out of this anyway. So less than or equal to 0, and we're just going to return. And this will allow us options for things to hit us and not actually damage us. So we're just going to pop right out of here. All right. That's going to allow us to pop right out. The next thing we're going to do is, if we actually are taking damage, our current health is going to be, again, minus equals damage. All right, just like we did the last time. That's going to subtract the damage amount from our current health. All right, and the last thing we're going to do is, I guess the only thing we have to do right now without anything else in here, I guess the last thing we have to do is check to see if we're dead. All right, if our current health is less than or equal to 0, then we is dead. All right, and for now, I'm not doing any of the GUI stuff. So for now, the only thing we really need to do is we're going to do it exactly the same way we did with the other one, and we're going to call a new function called make dead. All right, which we're going to have to write. And this is identical to the enemy one. Make dead. Let's make this into a public, because we might actually have something that just kills us instantly, like if we fall off the screen. All right, so we want to make sure we're doing that. So let's say public void make dead. So not only are things like our enemies going to be able to to use this to add damage and kill us that way, but something like falling off the screen will require instant death. And this way here we can just call this one function anytime we're killed. All right. So the first thing we want to do is if we're dead, we want to instantiate. Oh, I didn't put that up here. One more public game object. And that public game object is going to be our effects, so death effects. All right, perfect. The first thing we want to do is we want to instantiate our death effects. All right, so once again, we want to instantiate it at the location we are right here. So it's going to be our transform. Good. Dot position. All right, in our transform. Transform, not with a capital T, transform, I hate you. Transform, dot rotation. Great, and we want to instantiate, we actually want to instantiate our effects. Am I doing this right? Let me just make sure. I'm not. We want to, I should have put that at the beginning. Sorry guys, transform. It should go right here, right? Yeah. Death effects. So we want to instantiate our death effects. We want to instantiate it at position and with rotation. All right, and that's what we want to do. That's going to take care of itself. And the last thing we want to do for now is simply destroy the game object that this whole thing is on. So that's going to destroy our actual character. All right, and I think that's all we really need to do. All right, that's all we should really need to do in order to harm our character. So file, save. The last thing that we want to do is, I shouldn't have closed that. The last thing we want to do is, of course, add in our damage that this thing here can cause. And that's going to be called our enemy health script. And we really want to add it to the top location right here. Not enemy health, sorry, enemy damage script. I want to add it right here to the top location. So add component, add a new script, and I'm going to call this one here enemy damage, and create and add. So there's a couple of things that we actually want to add to this script. And what I want to happen is when the character jumps in and lands on this guy here, I want the character to take damage, and I want the character to be thrown off. All right, so we're going to have to write two things within that script. We're going to have to write a take damage, somehow to take damage, and somehow to push the character away. All right, so let's take a look at the script. Enemy damage, double click, open her up, and do this stupid thing to get rid of that graphical error each time. So once again, guys, we're going to go through and we're going to add in our public float, and this is damage. This is how much damage this object can do, this enemy can do. All right, we're going to say how often the character can be damaged. Now, we want the character as long as they remain within that radius, within this collider. As long as they remain within the collider, we want them to take damage. But we don't want it to be constant because the character would die instantly. So what we want to do is we want to say public float, and we're going to say damage rate. Damage rate. And this is how often that our enemy can do damage. All right. The next thing we want to do is we want to say, we want to have, like I said, we want to have the character be able to be pushed back. So I'm gonna add in a public, a float, and this is going to be the push back force. And basically what this is going to mean is when the character lands in the thing, it immediately gets pushed away. So it's not constantly taking damage, and it gives the player a chance to escape. And now we want to add one private variable, and we're going to call this next damage. And next damage is going to be that the next time that the damage can actually occur. So damage rate is how often it occurs, and next damage will be when it occurs next. The first thing we want to do is in start, we want to say our next damage is going to be equal to 0, which means 0f, which means that the character can be damaged immediately. All right. We could also say in here if we wanted to, if you really want to, you could say time.time. So that means that whatever time it first comes to life, or whatever we first start then. You can do it that way if you want, but I'm just going to say 0f, and that's perfectly fine. So the next damage is going to recur at time 0. So that means that the character can be damaged immediately. Now, we're going to need a couple of things in here. we already know that we have a collider that's a trigger, and that trigger collider has three options. When they first touch, when they stay within, and when they exit. I'm only going to use one of those because I really only want the player to be damaged when they're inside and they remain inside of that collider. It's kind of going to be a little like if they just barely touch it, I don't want to take it right away. Only if they stay in there. So if they just glance on it, I'm not going to worry about it. So we're going to have to add our void on, and I wish this finished, but it doesn't. Trigger stay. That's the one we're going to use. On trigger stay 2D. All right, and this comes up with a collider 2D. Sorry, collider 2D, and we're going to call it other. And boom. All right. So we're going to check a couple of things here. The first thing we're going to check is we don't want to damage anything else that comes in here. So only if it's our player do we actually want to do any kind of damage. So if our other.tag equals player, and I just want to make sure that I actually tagged my player as player. Good, I did. So the tag is player already. So if our other tag is equal to player, we're going to add a couple of things in here. No. If our other tag is equal to player and that requires double ampersand, and next damage is less than the current time, then we can actually apply damage. So only if we've surpassed that limit. All right, can we actually cause more damage? So if that's true, come in here and do some awesome stuff. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we need access to the player's health. So if the tag is player, then great. We're going to go in here and we're gonna make a thing called player health, because remember we have to be able to access this add damage. We're going to access player health, and let's just call this whatever, the player health, whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. I say that all the time. It really doesn't matter what you call it. Just call it something that everyone's going to understand when you're looking at this. And that player health is going to equal to other, so the other collider, other.gameObject. We're going to the top level of this thing here. We're not interested in the collider, but with the actual game object. And we're going to look for the component, dot get component, and we are looking for player health. All right, and again, this is going to give us a reference to our player health script. And now we can use that player health script, so the player health dot add damage. All right, that's going to allow us to add the damage equal to, what do we call it? Damage. So we are going to add damage equal to damage to our actual player. And then the next thing we're going to do is we don't want this player to continue to take damage, so we're going to say next damage is going to be equal to the time, our current time that this all occurred, dot time, so the immediate time that this occurred, plus our damage rate. All right, and that is going to give us an offset in when the character can take damage. Perfect. Now, I also said that what we want to happen whenever the character walks into this location is they're pushed away. And so from here, we're going to actually call an additional script, which we haven't written yet, called, let's call it push back. Push back is fine. Push back. Not push back force, just push back. What do we want to push back? This will take one argument, and that is going to be the other game object or transform. So the other transform is fine. The other transform. So we're going to be pushing the other transform away from us. All right. So that's all good. That's all we should need in there for now. But we have to write now our void pushback. And it's going to have in it a transform. And it's going to be called the pushed object. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I think I mentioned that already. We could have used an effector in forces, but I'm writing this in code. There's not a lot of code, so that's how we're going to do it. All right. Anyway, so basically what we want to do is we want to have a direction that this character is pushed away. And I think for our purposes, having the character pushed immediately backwards is fine. Is perfectly fine. All right, so like immediately up and away. Instead of trying to figure out the angle they're coming in at and everything else and doing the reverse, we're just going to go push them straight up, and that's going to allow the player to immediately have access to movement again, and they're going to be able to jump away from whatever is hurting them. So the first thing we need is our vector 2, and our vector 2 is going to be the direction of our push. So our push, let's just call this push. What direction maybe? Our push direction, fine, is going to be equal to a new vector 2, and we don't want any push at all in the x. We're not going to determine that at all. All we're going to do is push it directly up in the y. Okay, so we're going to be pushing this, the pushed object dot position dot y minus, and we're going to we're going to be pushing away from this existing object. All right, so push away from the transform. Please give me small t. You're not gonna. Is it up here somewhere? I don't like big T. All right, transform dot. Oops. Dot. Dot. The position of its y. Position dot y. So basically, what this is saying is my vector. The vector direction is directly opposite from whatever this thing here is. All right. And I don't know if this is necessary. I might have just been able to put 1 here now that I'm looking at it. But oh well. And then we're going to normalize it. So as soon as I normalize it, I could have just put a 1 there now that I'm looking at it. But whatever, I didn't. So we're going to normalize this vector. We're going to do it this way here. And dot normalize. Normal. Oh, is this right? Yeah, normalize. All right, and what this is basically doing, normalized. What this is basically doing is it's saying the direction I want to push is in the direct opposite y direction of the object that's pushing me. And then I normalize it, which means make it between a value of 0 and 1. A value of 1, and that is probably the same thing as putting a 1 here. So this code right here is a little bit useless. We'll try it later and see if I just put 1 here, if it works the same, and it's going to. So you guys can probably ignore that and just put a 1 here. Anyway, for now I'm going to do it like this. And our push direction, we're going to change this value a little bit. Our push, why did that give me an error? Comma. That all looks right. All right, anyway, let's see. Our push, no, this is why. I want this here. Sorry, looking at this code, it's wrong. There. That's good. All right, so our push direction, we're going to change it a little tiny bit. Because it's been normalized, now we want to give it a value that's not normalized to act as a force. So our push direction is going to be times equal, so we're going to be multiplying it times our pushback force, is what we called it. Pushback force, and that is basically going to give us some value for our force that we're applying to our object. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find our rigid body 2D, and we're going to apply. We're going to call it. Let's call it push. Let's call it push RB. That's fine. Push RB, and that's going to be equal to the pushed object, because we already know we've already found our push object. We already know what it is because we passed it in. So our pushed object dot get object, because once again we're looking to find our rigid body. Get component, pushed object dot game object, because we're looking at the game object itself. Game object dot get component, so we're getting the component on the actual game object of the transform we passed in, and we are going to get obviously our rigid body 2D. Boop. Great. Done. Now once we have this, we can actually apply a force to it. We can say our push RB dot velocity. So we're directly affecting our velocity, which means it's being exploded right away. First of all, I want it to be equal to 0. I don't want it to be moving. I don't want it to be affected by gravity. So our push RB is going to be equal to our vector 2, 0. And this is a short form, vector 2, dot 0. That is a short form of basically saying vector 2, x equals 0, y equals 0. And then I want to add a force to it. So I'm removing all forces from our rigid body, and it's being shot directly up and away from us. Push RB dot add force, which we've done previously, add force, and we want to add it in the push direction, and we want it to be an impulse force, exactly like we did before, this explosive force. Force mode dot impulse. All right, so let's go over that again because I kind of stumbled and stuttered in there. Our pushback, when the character comes in here, he takes damage and he's immediately going to be pushed away. We call our pushback function. We push the character in directly away in the y direction of our actual object that's pushing. We multiply that vector that we normalized by our pushback force right here to give it an actual force greater than 1. We then set we actually found our rigid body of the pushed object. We set the rigid body's velocity to 0 so that any movement that the player was making or any forces that were currently acting on it in any way are now set to absolute 0. And we immediately add an additional force in the direction and by the amount of the push force as an impulse force and explosive force. All right, that should be all we need to do. So I'm going to file and I'm going to save that. Now we should be able to go through and, let's just close this off, manipulate a couple of little things in here. And those things are things like our force, our character health, and that kind of thing. So let's go down here. This is all working. Oh, we got an unexpected symbol right here. What is this? Unexpected dot. In our enemy damage, line 25, let me see. Enemy damage, line 25. What doesn't it like? Player health. Oh, I got a period at the end here. Boop, get rid of you. File, save. Make sure everything's good. Okay, good. Everything looks fine. Now, we're going to go to our player, and we're going to make sure that our player has some kind of health. Let's give him a health of 20. And our death effects are going to be, let's go back to our project and to our prefabs, and we're going to drag our player death effects in there. Bam! Great. All right, so our player is done. Our spiky rock, let's go down here and take a look, currently has damage of 0. We don't want it to do that. We want it to have a damage of, let's say, 1. All right, so touching the rock causes 1 damage. It's going to have a damage rate. You guys can really determine what it's going to be. And this is more about gameplay than it is about anything else, because you're going to have to decide how often the player can take damage from the rock itself. All right, so 1 second here. I think what we're going to do is we are going to make it into a damage rate of, let's say, I don't know, 0.5. It doesn't really matter. And the last thing that we're going to do, it does matter. It matters for you guys as far as how often you want your character to be damaged. The last thing we're going to do is add in a pushback force, and our pushback force, let's say, I don't know, let's say 20. It doesn't matter. I'm just testing this as it goes. All right. With all that done, I think that's all we needed to do. Play, and if everything works okay, our character can go there. Now, when I jump on here, we're being pushed away. See, I'm being pushed away immediately. And if I jump on here enough times, I will die. Hopefully. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop this and make my damage much higher. Let's make our damage 10. All right. That way, if I jump up and down on here, ready, play. When I jump up and down on here, 1, 2, dead. All right, great. Great! That's exactly what we wanted to happen. I think I'm going to add a little bit more force to our player death effects. Our start speed is going to be between 4 and 12. Let's see how that looks. Jump, 1, 2, dead. Perfect. All right, guys. That's perfect. So now we can actually go through it, and I will. And I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you guys. Go through and add the death effects to this thing here. All right. Ultimately, what I do with this game is I said this thing here is not actually an enemy. I take the spiky rock and I remove it as an enemy, and that way we can't destroy it. We can only, I'm going to put it back to untagged. That way, watch what happens now. I can still shoot it, but it won't be destroyed. All right, not destroying. But it can still hurt me. It can still hurt me. All right, boom. That's ultimately what I did with that spiky rock. I didn't want the character to be able to destroy it. I didn't want it to be destructible terrain. I wanted them to have to deal with it rather than rather than anything else. So watch what happens. If I'm running, boom, I'm shut up and away, and I'm immediately pressed away. And I can jump over it like this, and that way no one gets hurt. Alright guys, everything is looking pretty good. There's one last thing I want to do, and that is to make this spiky rock into a prefab. I'm going to take it, I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to drop it. And that is pretty much it, guys. That is how we're going to deal with enemy characters. What I'd like to do in the next episode is I want to start taking a look at GUI. Alright, so we can actually see the damage occurring. Alright, everyone? I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Good luck in making your other enemies. I'd like you to right now, as an assignment, first of all, add the effects to this guy here. Second of all, make another obstacle, all right? Practice is what's going to make you good at this, guys. You're going to have to go through and practice. I don't want you to just follow what I'm doing. The whole point is that I'm teaching you, all right? Go through and make yourself another enemy using this technique, all right, guys? I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. Comments down below, guys. I'd like to hear what you have to say. In fact, I love hearing what you have to say. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.